The man who's leading the IMF delegation here is an Indian economist who's been praising George Osborne in the UK for his austerity measures. On December the 7th, we'll hear from the Irish government what their austerity measures are going to be. Neil Chennai from Johns Hopkins University, do you agree that only severe cuts will sort out these kind of problems?
Absolutely not. I think that severe cuts in the long run have the propensity to possibly decrease tax revenue in these countries, exacerbating the budget position that got the countries into their position in the first place. As I said on your show about a year ago now, or pardon me, 8 months ago, I believe that the only long-term solution to this issue doesn't stem from within any particular country, but from the European Central Bank guaranteeing the face value of the debt of all peripheral countries. It's going to come to that eventually. I mean, this is how financial contagion has spread for centuries. It starts in an isolated place, let's call it Greece, and it moves along the periphery until it threatens the central countries within any given system. The same thing is happening and unfolding in Europe today. So it's interesting to me that a couple months ago we were here talking about Greece. It wouldn't surprise me 3-4 months from now if we're talking about Spain and Portugal. I think this should serve as a signal to the European Central Bank, to the IMF, and especially here in the United States to the US Treasury, that we need a system-wide solution in Europe, and that ultimately quantitative easing of the sort that we've seen from our Federal Reserve, that is the European Central Bank buying sovereign debt to guarantee its face value, is ultimately what Europe needs. And until we see that, this crisis will continue ad infinitum.
Neil, you're in Washington, D.C. I'm here by the river in the Irish capital, Dublin. This is a part of town which has been regenerated over the last 10 or 15 years. You could say it's a decent symbol of the huge amounts of money that have poured into Ireland because of the property boom which drove the expansion of the economy, which became known, as I'm sure you know, as the Celtic Tiger. Up the road there, you can see the building which hasn't been finished. That's the Irish Anglo-Irish Bank. That's its new headquarters. We're not sure when that'll be finished. But all along the river here, you can see new flats, new offices, and just behind the camera I'm speaking to you on is a huge and lavish new conference centre. So things are still being built here. And keeping me company in Dublin, as well as Sarah from the Irish Times, is Regina, who's a student in town. Hi there, good to see you.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Well, just before you came along, we were talking about the possibility of young people leaving Ireland. Is that something you plan to do?
It's not something I'd hope to do. It's my country, and obviously we'd all like to stay here, but the worrying fact is that the possibility is when I finish in a year that I am going to have to emigrate, and it's something that my friends that have already finished, I know at least 50% of people are emigrating, like people who do physiotherapy. There's no jobs, there's the embargo on employment in the health service. Everyone just seems to be leaving, and it's really sad, but it's probably something a lot of us are going to have to do.
And what should Ireland do to try and stop this, Sarah, or is it inevitable now that at least one generation will be lost?
Well, the funny thing is, when you listen to Regina's story, that has been the story of successive generations in Ireland. Throughout the 1980s and well into the early 90s, entire classes had to emigrate. And I suppose that's the tragedy and the frustration of today, that we pulled ourselves out of that mess, we managed to get to full employment, and are we back to square one? Personally, I'm optimistic. I think with the IMF assistance, we can turn this around quite quickly and pull ourselves out of it. But it is a pity that people like Regina have to go back to what maybe her parents had to consider 20, 25 years ago.
Let's turn in a moment. We're going to take a call from Oscar in Portugal. But first of all, let's bring in Una, who's staying up late to speak to us from Singapore. And Una, you're Irish. What do you make of the problems for your country watching from afar?
Well, look, this is a really bizarre kind of scenario unfolding in front of us here in Singapore. Myself and my husband and our 2 children left Ireland 2.5 years ago. When the Irish economy was booming, things were good. We were products of the Celtic Tiger, and things were great. And within a week of arriving in Singapore, we saw the world fall apart, and slowly Ireland also followed suit. We've been watching this closely from Singapore. We've been watching our family and friends, and indeed ourselves and our interests and our property, our bank accounts, everything that we have at home slowly disintegrate. So it's been very strange for us to witness it from this distance, but it affects us as much as it does anybody on the ground, especially as we have family deeply ingrained in everything that's happening there. And we are...
Una, sorry to interrupt you. Would you consider moving home at the moment?
No, absolutely not. I mean, our end game is to avoid actually having to be back home in Ireland for as long as possible. You know, we don't have a big family strategy, but the short-term plan is to try and keep away, keep abroad for as long as we possibly can. If we had 50 rooms in our house, I think we could fill it twice fold with family and friends who would love to come and join us. So the idea of going home to Dublin is just completely anathema. We would absolutely not want to be home at this point in time, and we feel very lucky that we're here in Singapore, insulated somewhat from...
Well, Una, we appreciate you staying up late to speak to us. Extraordinary to hear an Irish woman saying she doesn't want to go home anytime soon and that she thinks most of her family would like to move out and be with her. Well, let's go from Singapore to Portugal, because if you read the analysis of this crisis here in Ireland, one of the countries that could be the most exposed if it's not fixed is Portugal. Oscar's on the phone. Oscar, do you feel glad that the IMF has got involved? Do you feel more secure now in Portugal now that the loan to Ireland is very likely?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, I think it's just delaying the inevitable. I mean, it just strikes me bizarre that they're actually still using the same thinking to solve this problem that has caused the problem in the first place. You know, to keep borrowing yourself out of a situation is just crazy. I mean, I think personally the party's over, and I think living in Portugal, I'm quite aware that the culture of Portugal, you know, I think that they're still well equipped to survive on a more independent level. I mean, and they're not, the Portuguese culture is not so involved in the capitalist system as maybe the Northern European countries are. Of course they are to a degree, but in terms of the people on the street, I really do feel that there is a strong family connection still here. And that dependence on the state is less here probably than in Ireland or any other Northern European country. So the whole idea of borrowing out of this situation is just crazy as far as I'm concerned.
Oscar, thank you very much indeed. Sarah can't hear you, but Sarah, Oscar's saying from Portugal, the party is over. The sooner everyone understands that, stops borrowing, stops spending, and just understands this kind of money doesn't exist, the better.
Yes, and I think that's what a lot of Irish people have realised, that what we had up till 2003 was sustainable. After that, it became unsustainable. So you won't find anyone here that will say that they want to go back to 2 years ago. We don't want to go back to that. We know it doesn't work. We want to rebuild a more sustainable economy built on something that's not just a bubble-like property.
Sarah, Regina, thank you very much indeed for your company, and to everyone else who's taken part in the programme, thanks to you as well. Well, that's it here on BBC World News, but of course there's plenty to talk about, which is why I'm about to jump in a cab, head to the Goblet pub in North Dublin to carry on the conversation on World Have Your Say on the radio. You can listen at bbcworldservice.com. Thanks very much for your company. I'll speak to you soon. Goodbye.